Welcome to another Infographic Instant with Brian Michael. In this episode, we'll be looking at the geographic link between money and innovation. By way of background, the paper from which this infographic comes looks at the link between innovation, geography, and financial center development. In that paper, we trace the academic literature and some of the data as to how financial centers develop relative to the innovations that they're supposed to finance. So, for example, when we look at the car industry in Detroit, whether we look at the development of shipping industry or even more recently the internet, we notice that money does not immediately come and cluster right next to these innovative hubs. In fact, we see some distance between the factories or the scientists and the money which makes their work possible. And so in the paper, we look at what academics call the optimal geographical distance or location between funding and production. And as you see in front of you, we can almost think of this along a line. So on one end of the line, think of this as a beach, walking down the beach, and on the left side of the beach you see innovation, a cluster of innovation on the left side of the beach, and on the right hand side of the beach you see a group of savers and investors. So this is a group of people with money who may have saved throughout their lives, who might be looking to get a rate of return on the money they already have. And so the question is, well, where should intermediaries who are looking to bring money to these new innovations, where should they locate? Should they locate right next to the producers? Should they locate right next to the funders? Or somewhere in the middle? And we know that theory tells us, well, it should be somewhere along this continuum, and there's a number of factors that drive where that location decision is taken, such as transaction costs, such as information costs, and you can read about this much more in the paper. But for our purposes in this infographic, we want to look at how theory has played out in the specific example of the solar industry in China. So turning our attention now to the infographic, we see the assets that are owned by photovoltaic companies in China on the far left and far right hand side of the infographic. So for example, China's photovoltaic companies in Shanghai had roughly 33.9 billion renminbi worth of assets during 2014. And in Tianjin, they had about 9.7 billion RMB during that time period. Looking now at the maps that we see in the infographic, we plot the clusters of these photovoltaic companies with circle sizes roughly indicating the size of the photovoltaic sector, particularly when we look at the right-hand side of this infographic. So looking at the clustering patterns, to the extent that there are patterns in these data, we do see significant clustering of these photovoltaic, these solar companies around Shanghai, which of course is not surprising because we know that innovations, particularly innovations which benefit from economies of scale, will tend to cluster in one place. However, we see much more dispersion than perhaps the simple economies of scale theory would suggest. We see clustering in the south, around the Shenzhen region. We of course see clustering in and around Shanghai. Interestingly, we do not see clustering around the areas where sunlight is the most abundant. Naturally, one might think, well, if photovoltaic producers want to take advantage of sunlight in order to generate electricity, then they should locate their production facilities more toward the west of China and thereby actually produce and assemble solar panels in an area where they can profit from them the most. But we clearly see that the geographic pattern of the location of these solar panel companies suggests that these are exporters. And in the paper you'll see that China is the largest exporter of solar cells in the world. Turning our attention to the right-hand side of the infographic, even within the supposed cluster around the greater Shanghai area, we see a large amount of dispersion in the geographical location of these solar panel companies. So while naturally we see a large cluster in Shanghai, we also see smaller clusters to the south of Shanghai, north, and even to the west. This suggests that any simple view of agglomeration cannot be sustained over time. It's not that these companies are clumping together like magnets, but instead they're forming an ecosystem which is located in a variegated geographical location, both around the greater Shanghai region and around China. So what does this mean for geography and international financial centers? Well, we know that Shanghai may not be the optimal financial center. We know that both from the theory, which we've just shown now and which we review in the paper, but we also know that Shanghai may not be the optimal financial center for the solar panel industry because there has to be a certain amount of distance between producers and financiers. So that suggests an important role for international financial centers like Hong Kong. This has been another Infographic Instant with Brian Michael.